Do you find yourself searching, yearning for more, but you don't know what that more is? I'm Catherine Duncan, near-death survivor, mystic, and intuitive. Welcome to Everyday Awakening. On this podcast, I explore what it means to be alive. I help you awaken into your soul and live fully now. Through inspiring conversations, we'll dive into mindfulness, spirituality, and the transformative power of presence and living aligned with this universal energy. Together, we'll examine life's biggest questions, and I'll share practical wisdom to help you open your heart and awaken to the preciousness of being alive. Today's guest is Mark Black, a world-renowned resilience expert, keynote speaker, and the only person to run a marathon with someone else's heart and lungs 4 times. Born with a severe heart defect, Mark survived a rare heart and double lung transplant at 23 years old and has since inspired people worldwide. Mark's the author of The Resilience Roadmap, founder of the Transplant Trot, and passionate advocate for youth and mental health. He lives in Canada with his wife and 3 kids. Thrilled to have you with us today. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Catherine. Glad to be here.
So I just want to start by saying you came across my radar. I've been following you on social media, and you're inspiring, and you're a role model for people going through challenging times, adversity. I just want to share that with you.
Thank you. That's what I try to do. So I appreciate that.
So you're someone who has gone through adversity starting at a very young age. And I just wanted to start with asking, how did you navigate this? How did you navigate these health challenges starting at a very infant child? How did you work with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of my success in doing that, if I've had any, is that I didn't know any better when I started. So the background for those not aware is that I had open heart surgery when I was 1 day old. I was born with a genetic heart defect that should have taken my life, and I was very fortunate that the doctors where I was born knew what was happening, medevaced me to a hospital where they could do something about it, and my life was saved for the first of a few times. So my childhood, from the time I'm kind of aware of life, was filled with medical challenges. And in part, I think that's been a great advantage because, again, I didn't know any different. To me, going to see a cardiologist 4 times a year and being in the hospital several times a year was just normal. It was just part of life. I think I was 7 or 8 before I realized I was at the beach one day and realized that everybody didn't have a zipper. I called it my big surgical scar from when I was a baby. So, but I think my parents deserve a lot of credit for that because they obviously did a good job at normalizing my life for me so that I, didn't feel necessarily that I was super different from anybody else. It was just my reality.
I was just going to ask, when did you realize you were different? So 7, 8, and do you remember how it felt? I mean, did you struggle with it?
Definitely. Interestingly, though, I think I struggled. So I'm 4 feet 11 inches tall today. So I've always been the smallest person in my class. Was the smallest kid in a university. I'm the smallest person in most rooms most of the time. That was probably harder to deal with as a young person than my medical challenges, even though they were certainly significant. I probably didn't have the awareness at 6, 7, 8 of how serious my health condition was and would become. I kind of gained an appreciation for that later, but certainly my difference in terms of just physical difference was very evident very quickly. And again, I think in long term, that was a benefit. In the short term, it was very challenging, but long term, it just taught me a lot about what really matters and what doesn't, and how to handle, being different, and how to handle having challenges and all kinds of things.
Did your parents, 7, 8, 9, 10, did they talk with you? I mean, did you feel like they saw you, talked with you, helped you with your feelings, which today there's so much out there now of how to parent, but back then, even my generation too, that wasn't really part of conversations. But Did your parents, were they there and supported you? What was that like?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, I often say that I won the parent lottery. I have to. Um, they're both phys ed teachers by trade, and I don't know that's particularly significant, except that I think there's something about people that do sport and coaches in particular who are just good at helping people work through challenging situations. So they kind of had an approach of, we're going to make his life as normal as it can be. And so I don't feel like I was treated particularly different. I have three younger brothers. I didn't feel like we were raised any differently. Obviously, I had some accommodations for health issues, but besides that, the expectations they had of me were the same as those of my three brothers. And I think in the long term, I think that was very advantageous. I think they were a soft place to fall, but they also were not afraid of holding me to the same standard that they would hold anybody else to. And I think that's important because I meet a lot of people whose support network have decided that the best way to support them through something really challenging is to let them off the hook for everything. So it becomes a crutch or an excuse to not live the life that they could live. And my parents certainly didn't do that. Rightly or wrongly, there was a lot of tough love there.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I'd say very blessed with your parents. You did win the lottery for what you went through to have parents, they talk about attachment, secure attachment, being seen and soothed and safe, secure. And, I'll share for a minute my background, 10, 11 years old, diagnosed with a very rare type of cancer. I was given a 20% chance to survive. And this is in the 70s. And they had no program for children. No one talked to me. And my parents, bless their heart, I felt their love, but nothing was said, never discussed. And it cracked me open, but it's not always a given when you're going through really rough times as a child that parents can step up. So I'm so happy to hear they were really there.
They did such a good job of balancing supporting me with allowing me to work through things. And so, like, for example, they made a conscious decision from a very early age that when the doctor was talking about my condition, they were talking to all three of us. It was never, and as a child in hospital, that's not a given. Well, it wasn't then. It would not be uncommon for the patient to be removed from the situation. I was in every meeting, every conversation, every hard diagnosis. And again, not easy in the moment. And there was a lot of tears and they had to comfort me and all that stuff afterwards. But because they allowed me to do that, I also didn't have the distrust or the fear or the many of the other things that come with when you realize later on that you've been sheltered and you weren't let in on what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very positive. And I remember, I'll just share that when I was 10 turning 11 and diagnosed with this rare childhood cancer, they did sit me down. The doctor did tell me, I had never heard the word before. I thought, I'll have to go to the hospital and take a Tylenol. Radically different when I went in and started years chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. It was pretty grim in the 70s. But from then on, never was anything ever told to me, ever. But I could feel the energy,
No, that's the thing, right? Yeah. I think we as adults, it's very easy to underestimate how aware very young kids are and how much they pick up on just energy, and their intuition is pretty fine tuned.
Mm-hmm. Would you be willing to share a little more with your story? So at 23, you had a heart and double lung transplant. So were they just keeping your heart going until then? I mean,
we knew probably by the time I was 11 or 12 that heart transplant was in my future. At that point, it was just a heart transplant, we hoped. Then as the condition grew worse and developed other complications, it became clear that I was going to need a heart and lung as well. So when I was 23, beginning of that year, I started to struggle at school. I was at university and I was just getting tired really often. I was more short of breath than normal, but I was also a 23-year-old male university student. So I was ignoring symptoms that in retrospect, I should not have ignored. I was losing weight. There were so many signs that I just didn't pay attention to. And I got home at the end of the year in the spring, and mom saw me and took one look at me and said, we're going to take you to the doctor right now. I had lost 30 something pounds. And again, I'm 120 pounds. So it was like a quarter of my body weight was gone. I was short of breath. There was lots going on. And my doctor saw me, put me in the hospital immediately. And about a month in hospital before they could stabilize me, and then said, you need a heart lung transplant yesterday. See what we can do about making that happen.
Wow. And then it all came together, the heart and lung. Was it a couple different donors, I'm guessing, or not? Or
no, same donor. So it came together, yes, but it was not a quick process. Well, first of all, we weren't even sure I was going to get listed. So the initial reaction was, you need a heart lung transplant, but the odds of us finding a donor for you are basically zero. The donor list is not plentiful. There aren't enough donors for everybody that needs one. And that's still the case today. And because you need 3 organs, and because you're small, and because you have congenital disease, you're going to be a much harder match than a 6 foot, 200-pound man who's been healthy his whole life. So I don't even know, my cardiologist is saying, I don't even know if we can find a transplant program that will put you on their list, but we can try. And so they sent my file to a couple of centers. I was really fortunate that the team at Toronto General, their multi-organ transplant program, said, yes, we'll kind of take a risk and put you on the list. And in order to be put on the list, you had to live within a 2-hour radius of the transplant center. Closest transplant center for us was in Toronto, which is about a 14-hour drive. So we had to move. So my dad and I moved 1,000 kilometers from home. My mom and my 3 brothers stayed back on the East Coast. And we waited for almost a year. I waited 5 or 6 months out of the hospital. And then my condition got to the point where I was too fragile to be out of the hospital. So they admitted me full time. And I lived in the hospital for almost 6 months before the donor was finally found and I had the surgery.
And it was one single donor.
One single donor.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. What a miracle.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I worked for years in my work as a chaplain, and I was the first chaplain at the University of Minnesota Hospital to be with a patient who came in, accident donor, was with that person when they passed, and then a few hours later with the transplant patient who got the organ. I know, it was a long shift. It was like, oh, what sacred work.
It is. Yeah, it's we had a chaplain as nun, a sister, who we didn't even know she was coming, but she came in the hours while I was between when I was told the surgery was happening and the surgery. So there was about a 6-hour window there, and she performed some sort of miracle because there was no nerves. I remember being the most calm and at peace that I have ever been in my life in the hour before I went into surgery, which you would think would be the time that you'd be almost in a panic. But it's very special.
What a blessing. I'm curious to ask you what has given you strength? And I don't know, for you, religious, spiritual, I lean towards spiritual, like what gives you meaning. Some people, it can be a sense of energy or God, Allah, Brahma, source. I mean, I'm working with thousands of people. I've heard everything, but I'm curious for you, going through this as a child, as a teenager, in your 20s, what would you share?
Yeah, absolutely. No, my faith is a huge part of my life. So I'm a Catholic, so that's my background. But yes, I mean the sense of purpose that gives me, the sense of peace that gives me, the perspective of, the world is not just about you. So many things, and family as well. I mean, I think having a support network, whatever that looks like for you. In my case, I was fortunate that it was immediate family, but it can be friends, it can be anybody. But having people who are the safe place to fall, who are the place that you can say what you're really thinking in the days when it's challenging, is really, really important. I mean, the number of times that a doctor came in and gave us bad news, and I was, had the super brave face while they were there, and then they leave and I fall apart, and it's my parents who would, pick up the pieces and help me through it. So, I mean, having those things around you is just so critically important.
I love your language. Safe place, soft place.
Yeah, it's to me it's a double-edged sword. It's both and. So as a parent myself, I really strive to be that safe place, but at the same time to not let our kids off the hook. Because that's what I think my parents did for me that was really smart, is they definitely gave me a safe place to fall. They definitely were the place to vent and to be comforted and nurtured and all of that stuff. At the same time, they weren't saying, "Oh, poor you, isn't life hard? You get a pass." They were saying, "You can't do this, but you can still do all these other things. Now go do them." Right? Like, you're still capable. You're not, an invalid. So get out there and pull your weight and do your part.
Sounds like really tuned in parents, really supportive. So going back just for a moment to Catholic faith, did that start coming into your life before 10 as a teenager?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we were raised. We went to church every Sunday from the time I can remember, and then as a teenager, continued to begrudgingly. There was certainly a period of time where we went because we were kind of forced is maybe a strong word, but strongly encouraged to go. And then, but when I went to university, I chose to keep going for whatever reason. It was always kind of a part of my life. And then certainly when things got really rocky, it was a strong, stable place to rely on. Yeah, I mean, prayer and my faith was a huge part of coping as I went through especially the waiting period for transplant, and then the time afterwards as well, the recovery. It was an integral part of my healing.
And you would say, I'm guessing that's still a big part of your life, faith, and it sounds like you use language, God. Everyone uses different language. Some people can be offended by the word God. It's okay. I think language can be limiting for people, but it sounds like, yeah, faith has been a really source of comfort for you to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. Comfort, guidance, purpose. I really feel like, rightly or wrongly, I believe that we're all here with something that we're supposed to do, and if you're still here, then it's not done yet. And so I feel like I have work to do, and I haven't been given the opportunity to have this second chance at life to squander it, and so it gives me the sense of kind of healthy obligation to try and do what I can to give back to the world, I guess, in some way.
And you realize being alive is a gift. It's a gift. I learned that at 11, 12 years old, and I had a near-death experience in my 30s, and I've been with many people at end of life as a chaplain, and you realize, wow, being alive, it's magical. I mean, it's just like every morning I wake up, I wonder if you do too, where I'm like, thank you. I mean, it's like, I'm here.
Absolutely. It's I think the greatest gift of critical illness, near death, any of those kinds of accidents, any of those kinds of things, when life is potentially going to end, is the perspective that it gives you, right? And the realization that, yeah, it's a freaking miracle that we're breathing right now. There's really cool science about the odds of you existing is like, well, not way more than 1,000,000 to 1. So each and every person listening to this, like, you're a miracle right now, right? You're not supposed to be here from when you look at the odds. So that, to me, that means something. What are you going to do with that opportunity?
And I've been voraciously studying why are we here, why are we alive since a teenager, and studying awakening. Well, my book is Everyday Awakening. And one of the paths I think people wake up, why are you here, is people going through crisis, upheaval. You're on the edge of life and death. There's huge grief. Often cracks people open.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And at least for me, the answer was, you're here to make a contribution of some kind, to serve in some way. It interestingly enough, even though the period of waiting for and having my transplant was very focused on me, and so in a strange way, it was all about me. My parents had to upend their life. My family had to totally change how we were doing things. you're in an environment where the doctors come in every day and it's all about you and your case and all this. It's so very me focused. But strangely, it was that experience that helped me to understand that it was not about me at all. That the only reason to be here is because you can make a contribution to everybody else. So it's a very interesting awakening for me in that way, to understand that, the biggest value to my existence was what it could do for the people around me.
Mm-hmm. And look at what you're doing. It's amazing. I just first have to highlight the fact that you have run 4 marathons. Wow. That's just amazing. I mean,
Well,
wow.
Thank you. I had a goal actually when I did this. After I did the second one, I said I'm going to do 5 before I reach 30. I guess it would have been. Yeah, that right? 30, 35. Anyway. And then we had our second child. And I remember going out for one of my training runs, which would be 3 or 4 hours long on a Sunday morning. And my wife was holding a newborn and our 3-year-old was running around. And I'm saying, bye, I'm going to go run for 4 hours. And then I'm going to be useless the rest of the day because I'm going to be exhausted. And I thought, my wife never said a word, but I remember thinking, this probably isn't fair at this point, right? Like, is this really, like, who is this for? And so that was shortly after that was the end of my long distance running career for the time being. And now the kids are old enough, I could probably start again. But I haven't run more than 10 kilometers in about 13 years.
Well, you're young. Easily, you can run another marathon.
Oh, I don't have any excuses.
Uh-huh. I've appreciated hearing you speak, listening to some of your talks. I want to get to your book, The Resilience Roadmap, but I appreciate what stood out to me as one of your talks. You talk about the phrase of a place of, oh no, to now what when life happens. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there's and I call it a critical moment, but it's a critical moment that occurs many times in our life. But anytime we come up against something significantly challenging, there's 2 critical moments. The first one is the moment of, oh no, I didn't think this was going to happen. This wasn't part of my plan. Right. So on a very small scale, that's getting cut off in traffic or running late or something like that. On a larger scale, it's, getting fired from a job or having a divorce or getting a critical illness diagnosis where, like, I've got my plan for how life is supposed to go. And this is an interruption to that. Like, oh no. And then somewhere along the way, later, we get to a point of saying, okay, now what? Now, what are we going to do about this? And the challenge for all of us is that in between those 2 points is a gap. Mm-hmm. And that gap can last for 2 seconds or 20 years, where we're just in that turmoil or the resistance, right? Where we say, I don't like this. This isn't fair. We don't want to accept it. We want to pretend like it's not happening, all of that stuff. And until we get to the point of saying, now what? We're wasting our 2 most valuable resources, which is our time and our energy. So sitting, and I'm sure you can relate to this, sitting in the hospital waiting for my transplant, knowing literally I could die any day, was a very poignant reminder to me of how precious and finite time is. And, even if we get to live to be 95, it goes fast. As we all know, the older we get, the faster it goes, it seems. And so I don't want to be wasting time stewing about something and not getting anywhere, right? And we all do it. I still do it. The idea is to shorten that gap, to make it as short as possible, so I'm not wasting a whole bunch of time being angry and bitter and resentful and just getting on to the business. Okay, well, what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. And so we have to accept it, not like it necessarily, but accept it, and then say, what am I going to do? And that served me really well in my transplant process. Served me really well again a few years ago. COVID happens. I'm a keynote speaker. I make 90% of my living is made by speaking in front of groups of people. And so, the March of 2020 happens and my entire revenue in my business for the year disappears in 3 days. I remember just getting phone call after phone call after email saying, we're not doing any events because we don't know what's happening. The world's shutting down. And not only was business gone for now, but is it ever coming back? Remember, it's very easy for us to forget, but nobody knew what was going to happen next. And so I was at a major oh no moment, right? Like, what am I going to do? And because I'd done it before and because I understood the process, the gap was pretty short. Instead of being months of, oh my gosh, like my life is over, it was about 3 days. And then I went, you know what? Okay, now what am I going to do? And I talked to colleagues and I plugged into support networks and we started figuring out virtual meetings, and my 2020 was the worst year I'd ever had in business as a speaker, and 2021 was the best. And I never left my studio in my little small town, and I spoke all over the world. And I attribute that to the ability of going from oh no to now what as quickly as possible.
That's a wonderful story. I do want to ask you, when you went from learning oh no to now what, when did that come to you? And how long did it take you? Like during the transplant, before the transplant? I'm just curious, was that a long span of time when you?
Yeah, at that time, I'd say it took me 6-7 months. Like, so from the time of diagnosis, then I'm listed for transplant. I'm still angry and scared and all of those things. Admitted to hospital, super frustrated, and I'm going to be stuck in this little room for the rest of my life, and lots of resentment and bitterness. And it took a couple of months in the hospital before I finally just said, you know what? Like, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I can't change it. Well, like, in fairness, one of the things I talk about a lot is we often will say, well, I don't have a choice. And I'll say, well, you always have a choice. In that moment, I would have said, I don't have a choice. In reality, my choice was I wanted to get a transplant. And in order to do that, I had to do this thing. Right. But I did have a choice. I could say, I don't want a transplant. I'm going back home. That was an option. Just wasn't the option I wanted to take. So I had to accept that, okay, this is part of getting to where I want to go. So I need to let go of being angry about that. And once I was able to do that, it became much easier to live with. It was, by the time we got near transplant, I would say that I felt like I was living a very normal life, even though the circumstances of it were very bizarre. I watched movies with my friends who would come to visit. We had pizza and beer for my birthday in the hospital. Like, we just created a normalized existence in a very abnormal environment.
And I would say that takes strength and courage. I mean, I've learned this personally, but professionally, and the many, many people I work with, it takes courage to go inward and reflect and do some of that soul searching and the consciousness of, okay, what am I going to do with my life? How do I want to live? What are my choices? How can I move forward? What do I, what fills my heart and soul?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the many of us, and it's so easy to do because we live in a world of constant distraction. There's plenty of opportunity to never ask yourself these questions, right? But when you do, if you have the courage to do it and really sit with the question and then discover the answers, there's a whole new level of awareness, of peace, of all kinds of great things that come from that. And it's work worth doing.
Mm-hmm. And you don't, I think, even probably know how many people you inspire and how many people's lives you've touched just as a living example of how you're living your life, what you've learned, what you're sharing.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's certainly the goal. But to your point, I think, yes, by the way you live your life, it's one of the things I've learned as a parent is more is caught than taught. That our kids will emulate more what they see than what we tell them to do. And so, yeah, if you want to inspire people, just start by living an exemplary life, or as close to that as you humanly can. And I think you serve as a great inspiration for people. Mm-hmm. What I see on the stage is, I hope helpful, but what I really work on is making sure that I'm walking the talk when I'm not on the stage.
Mm-hmm. And it is so true. My kids are launched. They're in their late 20s, but everything kids learn, they learn everything until 18, maybe when, they move out. Nonverbal, they learn emotional intelligence and skills. They learn so much from parents. So it's pretty amazing how you can help and shape your children by doing your work, by doing your healing. That's how they learn healing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, tell us about your latest book, The Resilience Roadmap. Love to hear what you have to say about your book. I believe you have 4 steps to being resilient.
Yeah, so the keynote that I do has 4 steps. The book actually has 7. It's just that often I can't get to all 7 of them. And the book is basically, I sat down a couple of years ago and said, I'd been starting to teach some of this stuff. And I said, let me reverse engineer how I got through the transplant process. And I actually say how we got through it because it was very much a family journey. And it wasn't that we went, okay, first we should do this, and then we should do this, and then we should do this. We just figured it out. That's what you do, right? You just stumble through it and make lots of mistakes. But looking back, I went, okay, what were the things that we did that worked? And what came out of that was this book and this process. And the key elements were the core four, which is what you're referencing, which was accept. So before that comes acknowledge, but so we have to face the problem. We have to accept the parts of the problem that we can't control, which is the hardest human thing to do, even though we all know we need to do it. What parts of this do I control? What parts do I not control? And let me let go of what I don't. Adapt. So now that I know what I can control, how do I change my behavior, my mindset, my thinking to thrive in a new reality, right? So our world is constantly changing. Your personal reality might be changing as well if you're, again, dealing with a diagnosis or whatever. To continue to behave as you did and expect to get the same results doesn't work because the rules have changed. So how do you adapt your behavior and your thinking to thrive in a new environment or in a new reality? And then what the next step is the aspiration. So the challenge that we can fall into often in a world that's changing frequently is that we can be constantly adapting without any vision for where we're going. And so then we're just kind of like treading water, right? We're staying alive, we're surviving, but we're not really thriving because we're not really moving towards something. So we need to know what that is. And so taking time to aspire and say, what's the goal? Where do I want to go? What do I want my life to look like in a year, 3 years, 5 years? Again, something that I think we're really good at when we're 6, 7, 8, and not so good at when we're 26 or 36 or 46, because we get busy and life happens and we just start to get stuck in routines. But if we can take the time to say, what is it that I really want and where do I want to go? And then finally, it's to act. It's to say, okay, well, now let me put a plan in place and start to make small progress towards that thing. Because so many people feel stuck because they think that today is like they're just going to live today on repeat for the rest of their life. They think that whatever they're going through right now is permanent. Nothing in this world is permanent, right? None of us are permanent. We're all going to die. So knowing that should be great encouragement if you're going through a challenge right now to say, this too shall pass. Let's figure out what I want the next chapter to look like.
Mm-hmm. I love the steps you just outlined. And would you say these are the steps that you, when you look back, you organically went through?
100%. Yeah, that's where that's where it all comes from. So, I mean, it was acknowledge. So the full steps in the books is acknowledge, right? So face the problem. Mm-hmm. So I didn't face the problem, right? I was feeling all these symptoms at university, ignored them, made all the wrong mistakes, finally was forced to acknowledge something was wrong. Then it's agency. So it's understanding, okay, I still have some control in this situation and I need to take responsibility for the power and control that I do have and do my part. And so from the time I was listed and then hospitalized, I had very little control over a lot. I mean, anybody that's been in a hospital knows you're subject to their schedule. They bring you what you're going to eat. Like there's a lot of it is out of your control. But I could do a little bit of exercise. So I made sure that I walked laps of the hospital ward every day. I could do a little bit of weights to maintain some muscle mass so that after I got through transplant, hopefully I could recover faster. I could take my medications properly. I could follow the meal plan. I could do those things. And so I focused my agency on that. And then accept the things I can't control, adapt. So we adapted a lot of things. We decorated my room so that it'll look like a bedroom instead of a hospital room. We brought in my bedspread and my pillows and my blankets from home. We brought in my street clothes so that I didn't have to wear this stupid hospital gown. And none of those, the thing that I talk about a lot with companies that I'm talking to is none of those adjustments cost very much money or took very much time. And individually didn't make a huge difference and didn't transform the circumstance. However, cumulatively, they massively transformed my experience of that same reality, right? Still in the hospital, still sick, but my experience of it was so much better because of these simple little shifts. So that's what adaptation is all about. And then very early, I made a conscious decision to say, what do I hope comes from this? And not just like I'm going to live, but like, what do I want my life to look like on the other side of this transplant? And I thought about being active, and I thought about having a family. And so that aspiration was what gave me purpose and vision and hope to get through the trials and tribulations of waiting for a transplant. So that when it finally came, I had something to work towards. One of the challenges that a lot of people face, and I faced it as well, was, okay, now what? Like, my whole existence is focused on survival. I survived. Oh crap, now what do I do? Like, I don't have to go to the hospital 4 days a week anymore. I don't have to. It's a very strange thing. If you haven't, I'm sure you get it, but people who have not been through a critical illness, you started with most people anyway, with a great resistance and distaste for being in a medical environment. And then after a while, it becomes so normalized that you become almost dependent on it. It becomes this like safe place to be. And when you're not there anymore, it feels strange. And I remember like being discharged from hospital and feeling very uneasy because I'm not sure how to live in the real world anymore. And it took that vision and that aspiration for what my life wanted, what I wanted my life to look like, to give me the drive to figure out what the next chapter was going to be. And then taking action, right? Then it's small baby steps. I show pictures in my presentations of going from sitting in a hospital bed 7 days after transplant, weighing 75 pounds with wires hanging out of me, to crossing a marathon to finish line 2.5 years later. That doesn't happen like that. That happens in small incremental baby steps that are imperceivable one day to the next.
And it takes tremendous strength and courage and skills and consciousness to all these steps from, accept to adapt to aspiration to seeing a vision. I mean, many people, I'm guessing you see this in your work. It's so easy to get stuck in your mind, where you get stuck in a worry or a fear or anxious, a limbic loop, and you just get stuck there and you shut down. And how do you just take it a step at a time, letting the feelings come through you and accepting? Just accepting's huge. Then starting to hold even a vision of like, well, what do I want? What's that vision? The whole world of manifesting. It's powerful. As we know, what we think and feel is creating our neural pathways, shaping our brain. It's creating our reality. I mean, you did it all. You're doing it.
No, you're right. It's very much realizing that you have more power than you probably imagine that you do, that much more is possible for you than you probably give yourself credit for, all of those things. And also that, I forget, this isn't mine, but it's a great saying. You don't have to believe everything you think. Right? So understanding that your thoughts are not real, they're just your thoughts, and you choose to question them. And you can choose to say, well, is that accurate? Right? So when you're saying to yourself, oh, I just failed, I'm a failure. Well, are you really? Or did you just fail at this one thing and you're actually really successful at these other things? Right? So it's understanding that you can't always trust your own thinking the first time around.
I just have to ask, are you aware of the book, Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen?
No, I haven't read it yet. Okay.
Must read. I read 2, 3, 4 books a week, and I have since a teenager. My number one book in 2024, Don't Believe Everything You Think. It's a little over 100 pages. It's a wonderful introduction even before you get to an Eckhart Tolle. Exactly. Don't believe everything you think. Where are you living? Are you living in your mind? Are you living in your heart? Where are you? How are you choosing to live every day?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm excited to read your book, The Resilience Roadmap. Excited to read it. I think everything you're sharing is just, magical steps of how do we live life each day amidst adversity, amidst the chaos of life. I mean, none of us escape this.
That's the thing, right? And I think so many people make it harder by trying to avoid it instead of just saying, look, I'm not going to chase it. I'm not going to go looking for problems, but I will have them because that's part of our existence. And even just acknowledging and accepting that is huge, right? So a lot of what I teach is actually like 5,000 years old, and I didn't know until I started reading Stoics, and I went, oh, I'm just saying all the same stuff they did. So one of my favorites is he who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. Marcus Aurelius, which
Yeah,
was
I was going to say
one
Marcus
of my
Aurelius.
nicknames when I was a kid, actually, interestingly enough. But yeah, it's such a, and that's such a powerful thought for, I think, today's day and age of, we live in an age of angst and anxiety all the time. And if people would just realize that every time you're worrying about something that might happen, the best you're doing is living it twice. Right. And at worst, you're living something that you don't even have to live because it's not going to happen at all. But at best, you're living the pain twice. Like, if you can't fix it, let it go, which is way easier said than done. But with practice, we can get better at it.
I have to share that I had a framed quote from Marcus Aurelius on my wall growing up. It was very little is needed to make a happy life. It's all within yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the Stoics and Marcus Aurelius' writings in particular are just so packed with wisdom that, again, you wouldn't think you have anything in common with a Roman emperor, but turns out that you is just a normal person like all the rest of us.
I think you've already answered this question, but I want to hear your opinion on why you think we're here. What do you think it means to be alive?
Yeah, I mean, my personal belief is that we are here to serve. I think that that's where we find meaning. I think that's where we find purpose. I think that's what allows us to get outside of ourselves and away from our ego. And listen, I still have all of that stuff. And I mean, I stand on a stage and get applause and enjoy that and all of that. But when I'm, at my best, I think I'm not in my head and I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just trying to give something of myself to other people because that's, I don't know, that just seems like the most rewarding and fulfilling thing to do.
Beautiful. Yeah, I resonate with that. I feel that as well. I mean, we're here. There's a reason we're here on this earth.
It doesn't make any sense to me why you exist otherwise, right? There's got to be a purpose. Whatever you, again, whatever your faith background, you're gonna pull that from a different place. But I think the conclusion is still the same. We're not an accident, and so if you're not an accident, then there's a reason you're here. And I tend to think that there's a reason we're all so different, right? You have a unique set of skills, talents, abilities, experiences that nobody else has had quite like you have. No, there isn't. We know scientifically, genetically speaking, we are all 100% unique, which tells me there's something we can each do, small or big, that only we can do. So we ought to be doing it.
Which leads me to, I'm curious to ask you, years of being a chaplain, I actually worked with a number of people transplant on both sides. And there's research that when people get a transplant, an organ from another person, they may start picking up some of the characteristics of that person or sensations or cravings. Is there any truth to that for you?
There seems to be. I know nothing about my donor, so I have no way to back it up to know if that's what it is. But I will say that immediately after transplant, like the first awareness I had of something I wanted to eat or drink was I wanted coffee. And that's strange because I had never had a cup of coffee in my life. And I worked at a coffee shop for 6 months and tasted it and didn't like it and would recommend what other people recommended because I didn't like any of it. And that was the first thing I wanted. And I am a avid coffee connoisseur to this day. So yeah, I don't know. It's cellular memory is what they kind of talk about it in the medical world. That somehow a little of us is in every cell in our body. And so therefore, some of that person is in my consciousness and awareness, and which to me makes sense. But yeah, that's the manifestation for sure. For me is the coffee thing. But yeah, I mean, there's also just a ever present awareness that somebody else's life carries on within me, and especially because of it's true for every transplant recipient, but certainly for a heart transplant recipient, I just have to go like this. Right. And I feel someone else's heart beating in my chest. And it's a very real awareness that I have someone else's life with me all the time.
Wow. Well, fascinating. There sounds like there might be something there with the coffee drinking.
Yeah, I think so. So.
My understanding with transplants from working in the field is that when you donate organs, some people will share their identity and others don't. So I don't know if that's anything you could look into or not.
Yeah, that's the way it works here as well. And we were, as a family, given the opportunity to write a note to the donor family, which we did. And that note goes through like a medical board, central organization, so that the anonymity of both parties is preserved. And then if the donor family chooses to respond, they can. In our case, we never got a letter back. So for whatever reason, they weren't ready or whatever. We hope that our letter got to them so that they knew the impact that the donation had on us. But I don't know anything about my donor, unfortunately, other than we know, because of my physical stature and because lungs have to fit in the rib cage of the person, it has to be a very tight match. So there's a pretty high probability that my donor was a child just because of my physical stature, but we don't know that for sure.
Very, very interesting. Well, you're very blessed. I want to end with my last question. I always ask guests, what does awakening mean to you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we've kind of touched on it already. It's understanding what a gift it is to exist. Not to mention to exist. I mean, if you're watching this or listening to this, then you're have access to technology and you're in a place where you're living a pretty fortunate life. I mean, it's very easy to lose track of that, but I mean, gosh, if you live in North America, you're in some of the richest parts, most abundant places where you can have the best opportunity to thrive of anywhere on the planet, and you're alive at arguably the best time to be alive. I mean, it's funny because people often talk about how challenging it is these days, but look, by and large, our life gets easier and easier and easier the further along the path we go. So you have this amazing opportunity to be alive, to have resources, and to be in a place where you have access to all the information that we do. I feel like it's a responsibility to go out there and take advantage of it.
Thank you. Absolutely lovely. You are inspiring. Thank you for coming on the show. I hope you and I get to meet one of these days. I can feel your radiant energy. Yeah, you're just absolutely lovely. How can people find you?
Markblack.ca, because I'm in Canada, is the easiest place to find me. And then I am Mark Black on all the social media channels. That's where you'll find me.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. Lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining Everyday Awakening. Let's keep the conversation going online. You can follow me on Instagram at Catherine Duncan, MABCC. And to keep up to date on the show, subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. I'd love to hear from you.